Okay, all right. Well, hello everyone. We have around 9 participants as of now. Probably some more will start joining along the way. Let me see if I recognize some names. If I do, one of them. Okay. All right, so welcome again. My name is Jaime Rosales, so I'm a senior developer advocate for the Forge team, the Forge platform. Today it's September the 13th, 2021. If you guys are Twitter users, this is my handle, AfroJNE. I actually have my hair kind of like tie back. That's the reason you cannot see the pro. But other than that, like we're good. So yeah, so let's get started with this. So welcome to the online bootcamp that is going to be taking place today. This is going to be a 4-day, 4 tutorial event. Basically, we're going to be going over the use of the Learn Forge platform. Where do we have as well parallel tracks as of today that are using different server-side languages, like in this case, Node.js and .NET. So this session, it's Node.js. So if you are in the wrong session and you need to switch to the other one, I'm not gonna take it personal. So you guys can go ahead, and this is for your own benefit. So definitely you can transfer out to the other session. So like I said, it's gonna be 4 sessions per day. Today we're gonna be doing I will tell you a little bit more about it before that. But before the sessions itself, what you guys can expect is we will be coding. So we will be doing like some small coding, not drastically a lot, but we want to kind of teach you how to get started with the platform. What are the benefits of using the platform? How can you use the different services that we have? We will be answering questions in regard to the tutorial and the bootcamp. I know some of you might have experience with Forge already. You might have questions on separate projects that are happening to you as of now. I'm happy to take some of those questions, but I would like to not kind of like go off track too much from the tutorial session today. So now I will be doing some coding, and I will be teaching you how to get started. What are the steps to take? And then I will give you some time. So we will have like split up in breaks in order for you to take care of the piece that I just showed you how to do. And you can submit your questions and so on. And then we will have a dedicated time slot in order to do the questions. Okay. So today, Monday, we will be doing the tutorial on uploading, translating, and the previewing of a 2D or a 3D design. So this could be designs for the AEC industry, for manufacturing, and so on. If you don't have any CAD models available to you, don't worry about it. I can give you a link where you can get some sample models that we have. So, and then also show you where in the tutorial material that we're gonna be going over today, you can find those. So it's, don't worry about if you don't have that. The next couple of days, also on Tuesday, we'll be doing a tutorial on accessing design files from Web360 Docs or Autodesk Construction Cloud or Fusion Team. It's going to be quite similar to the one that we're going to be doing today. The only thing is that we have a different way to change the accessibility of the authentication, because you're going to be accessing user context data, right? Wednesdays, we're going to be doing customization of viewer and adding also dashboard functionality to your application. So it will be a build-up of either of these two from here. And on Thursday, we're going to be doing modification of design files using the design automation service. This could be using Revit Design Automation, AutoCAD, Inventor, 3ds Max, or Civil 3D. Okay, so let's move along. For day one, like I said, we're going to be doing uploading, translating, and previewing of the 2D and 3D designs. And it's going to be looking something like this. It's actually a single page application, quite, I will say it's quite simple, but at the same time powerful. And the reason being is that we're going to be tapping into different uses of the services here. So if you notice on the beginning of the GIF or GIF. I don't know, how do you guys call it? I call it GIF. So we have the option of create a new bucket, where a bucket it's going to be our container where we are going to be storing our CAD files. And also we're going to be storing the translation of those CAD files in order for later on use the viewer and let us visualize the CAD file directly on the web. So it simply starts with an authentication. So we're going to need API keys from the Forge platform pertaining to your account in order to have this individually for you, right? Cloud consumption and all that stuff happens in this kind of services, especially on the translation side for this sample. So it is best if you have it within your account. You don't have to pay anything today. Basically, we have a 90-day free trial that also includes 100 cloud credits for you to get started and test out the platform and see what's the benefit of this and so on. So yeah, so definitely we'll get some stuff getting done in there. So we create a bucket. We have the functionality to upload a file to the bucket, and then we can request the translation of that file. Once that file is translated, we can click again on that file, and now the viewer already knows that there is a derivative available for us to be able to visualize into the viewer. So now we can load that, and now we can start seeing our 3D model or 2D model, depending on whether you translate, completely loaded on the viewer page, and then we can start interacting with that. Okay, so like I said, quite simple, but at the same time, like quite powerful. So let's move along. And the way that we are going to be splitting up this, we're going to be focusing on the PST time zone. So I'm based out of New York, so for me it's 11 a.m. right now, but I know some of you might be on that side of the world, so it might be around 11 a.m. I hope you guys had your coffee, and welcome again, and thanks for joining. And we're going to be giving you like some split up time there that allows you to basically take it slow. I know the day-to-day kind of happens. It's Monday. You might have some other stuff that kind of interrupt you, but we're going to give you enough time for you to set up and be able to continue with that. So I will just ask you, set up, if you can, some reminders or some alarms that we're going to be being like live again between this kind of times. Okay, so feel free to take a screenshot as of now, and then I will be moving along with the other stuff. Okay, so if you need a screenshot later, let me know, but if not, I'm going to continue. Okay, so let's start with session 1, which is basically the introduction and the setup for what we're going to be doing today. So we are going to get started with, first, we have a couple of prerequisites that are going to be a Forge account, okay, if you don't have one yet. We're going to be creating a Forge app, basically in order for us to get the API keys that we need for the use of the services, okay? And then later on, we are gonna move along and then do a setup of our development environment. So, like I said, this session is gonna be using Node.js, okay? So if you have Node.js already installed in your computer, great. If you don't, this is where you can get it. So you can head over to nodejs.org, and then I will recommend getting the LTS version. There is another version in there that it's kind of like very experimental. So to keep it safe, let's do the long-term support. This has been around for quite some time, so it gets updated with the latest functionality of Node.js, but this is basically defined as the more like stable version of this runtime. And then for development environment, we're going to be using Visual Studio Code. So again, I also recommend the stable build. So if you don't have Visual Studio Code, you can head over to code.visualstudio.com and obtain it from there. Okay. So those 4 steps that I just talked to you about, I'm going to do a quick demo time right now. Okay. So let me switch my screen. And if you have any questions, I'm by myself as of now, but I'm happy to take questions from time to time. So just type them in the chat or the Q&A. Perfect. So there is one question already, which I think it's an interesting one, and I can tell you. Just, can I still follow along if my Forge trial expired? I may have signed up a while ago, but never ended up using it. So in this case, we're going to need the use of cloud credits. My recommendation as of right now, I'll say, why don't you probably get started with a new account with a different email, just to take advantage of that trial period. Later on, we can, what this thing needs is basically enable a subscription, so a paid subscription. But like I said, I don't want you to be like a blocker for you right now that you have to pay the service. I'll say just try to use a different email for now. Let's get started with that. And then from there, we can look into your account later on. Okay. All right. So let's move along. Let me switch my screen. 1 second. I have a lot of stuff open, so this is what I want to get rid of. Okay. Where is screen? Stop. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Let's try to do this. There we go. Okay, I think you guys are seeing my first screen now, which is the Learn Forge material. And I'm just gonna move stuff to my other screen, so that way, in case you guys write or anything like that, I can still look into it. Okay, so this is what we're gonna be looking into today. Like I said, you can head over to. Let me actually type this in the chat, so that way you guys have it. So you can head over to learnforge.autodesk.io. This is going to take you to this homepage. And basically, here's a small description of what is going on with the page, what is going on with this Learn Forge material, and what actually is Autodesk Forge, if in case you don't know. So basically, Forge, it's enabling these companies to tap into that engineering data, right? So allows you to do visualization of 3D models, extraction of data, of metadata, of those models itself. We support around 50 plus different file formats, not only Autodesk ones, let's say Rhino, CATIA, and so on. And then you can convert those formats into something that we have available in the platform, which is the viewer, and allows you to do visualization of those CAD files directly on the web. You don't have to install any extension. You don't have to basically do anything else other than just opening a website. Okay. So before you start coding, there is a section here. And if you remember from the slides, basically it said we're going to be setting up first a Forge account. Then we're going to be doing creating a Forge app that it's going to give us the API keys that we need in order to do that. Later on, we're going to continue with the tools where we're going to have a reference to Node.js and also to the Visual Studio Code installation. Okay, so if we go over here and then easily we can go to Forge Developer Portal. So we're going to open a new one. Actually, let's open this in incognito. And the reason why it's because other than that, you're not going to be seeing how an external person basically looks at it like you. So, and then from here, it's a Forge website that allows you to do exploration about the documentation, how to get started, some of those solutions that we have for different kind of uses, success stories in case you're interested in how other customers and partners are actually using the platform in order to get through it. Later on, also some community, so you can learn about the partnerships that we have, the system integrators that we have, the events, like such as this one, like the bootcamp, And then at the same time, also information about accelerators and so on. And then pricing information, which is quite interesting also, in case you want to take it a little bit step forward with the use of the platform. So from here, we're going to be going into doing the quick sign up. So if you don't have an account, or in your case, like the anonymous question came in, it just said anonymous, you can sign up for the use of a trial of Forge. So use an email address that you don't have registered yet. This will give you 90 days plus 100 cloud credits for you to test out the platform. So head over to the sign up part, and then once you've signed up, you're going to be able to get into visualizing. Let me see. 1 second, my apps. Yeah, so then you're going to be looking into something like this. If you see, I have quite a lot of different apps. Well, I work for that team, so that kind of requires me to do some of that stuff. But then you can create a Forge app. So once you create a Forge app, we're going to give that app a name. And then we're going to also give what kind of application type we're going to be doing. So in this case, this is something new. If you were familiar with Forge in the past and everything, this kind of looks a little bit new for some of you. But what we're going to be working on today, it's going to be a traditional web app. Basically, it's a server-side web application that can securely store secrets, supports the two-legged and three-legged authentication. A desktop, mobile, or single-page application. It's an app that runs natively on a device or a browser, which could be as well, but also supports the three-legged authentication with PKC. We're not going to be doing that today. And then also, it's not going to be only a server-to-server application. So in this case, we're going to do the traditional web application. And we are going to give it a name. So I do have one already, which is this one, Bootcamp September 2021. And if you see, I have some services selected. In your case, you're going to be a couple different ones. So just make sure that you have model derivative selected, because this is the one that we're going to be using. And I think I can actually show you how with one of my other testing accounts. Forge. We'll go here. And I hope you still don't hear the massive construction that is happening. I still remember this. Beautiful. So I need to enter my code since. Yeah, so basically we do a create app. This is how it's going to look. Oh, sorry, that other thing was probably for me. But this is going to be, okay, so your app name, we're going to call it Test or Jaime Bootcamp. Bootcamp 2021. Teaching. Bootcamp. And then callback URL. If we don't know that, we can head over again to the Learn to Forge material before you start coding. We give you a callback URL that you can use whenever you're debugging locally. I will copy this and do that. As of now, I don't think we're going to be using it, at least for today's tutorial. But if you're going to be attending tomorrow, and you want to use the same kind of API keys, I would recommend use the same value. So you can obtain it there from the Learn to Forge material. And then which APIs are we going to be selecting? So if we want, we can leave all of them selected. If it doesn't use the service, it's not going to consume the credits on that behalf. But we have the model derivative API, which is, this is the important one that we need, and the data management API. Okay, so those are the two that we're going to be using today. So create app. Okay. So now we have our client ID, our client secret, the app name, the description, and the callback URL. Client secret kind of looks like this. If by any chance your client secret gets exposed, you can always regenerate on your run. And now it's a different value of what I actually just showed you, okay? All right, so that's for the creation of the app. Now we keep going with this, and then we're gonna head over to tools, and then we're gonna select Node.js. And like I said, if you have Node.js installed, you don't need to do this step. But if you don't, I will say go to Node.js, and you're gonna be downloading the LTS version, which is the most recommended for users. In my case, I'm a Mac, so the operating system is a Mac OS, and that's the reason it gives me the option to do the download for this. But if you're using Windows, also like it's gonna give you the option for Windows, okay? And then later on also, we need an IDE to write the code. So there are many options, and in this tutorial, we will be using Visual Studio Code. So we head over to Visual Studio Code, and then again, we're gonna download the most stable build. It does have different ones. So like in this case, if you're using Windows, you can download the stable one. If you're on Linux, you can also do that one, or the universal one for Mac OS. Okay, so once we download that, we're gonna be basically shown, let me see if you can see this. I think you can. So basically we're gonna, oh, that's my drink water reminder. You're gonna be seeing something like this, where we have an option to open a folder, create a repository, and so on. So I did create a folder already, which I call Bootcamp September 2021. So I'm gonna open this folder. And now we have an empty folder in here, okay? But something that I wanted to show you was that Visual Studio Code has an option to use a terminal directly from the IDE. So once we have a terminal available, if we want to check if we have Node, we can do something like Node version, and this will give us a result back on the version that we currently have installed. So, and then at the same time also, if we need to check if we have npm, which is the Node package manager, we can do npm -- version, and it's going to give us the value of the version, okay? So basically, up to this point is when we are already going to have the following. Let me switch back to my slides. So demo time. So up to this time, again, we're going to have the Forge account check, the Forge application with our API keys, and the development runtime editor, okay? Which is basically the Visual Studio Code, okay? So this is going to be what I require you to do as of now. It is close to 8:30 Pacific time coast. And let me ask you the following. Do you have any questions in regards to this? Then after this part it's done, we're going to have the second session, which is going to be until 10 a.m. Pacific time coast. And the session 2, we're going to go over the basic server authentication, and then also just feel free to submit your questions via Zoom. I will catch them when I get back. Node version 14 required or recommended? What depends. If your Node version is lower than 10, I will say update. If you have, I don't know, version 10, or I don't know what was the previous one before that, the 14. I'll say I think you should be okay. But I'll say, like, if you have a chance to update, oh yeah, 19 with a 12, 16, you're okay. You can leave it with that. Yeah, you're good. So answer nice, done. Okay. So yeah, go ahead, do the Forge account. For those of you that had an account and expired and all that, easier. Jump into doing just one with a new email address, and that way you take advantage of that 90-day free trial, and then at the same time also the 100 cloud credits that we give you for free, so that way you can translate as many files as you want. Once you have that account, you're going to be creating the Forge application again. Okay, so you're going to be selecting model derivative API, data management API as required. And then we're going to get those API keys ready for us to use in the next sessions. And then also for your development runtime, again, we need you to have Node.js. And then also, do we need to install some Node packages modules in the folder? So we are going to install those, but when we get to the point where we build our package JSON file. So as of now, in this session, it's not required to do any npm install or anything like that because we don't have anything yet. That's going to come up in the next session. But to answer the question, yes, we're going to be installing some Node packages in that folder. So I will say start with a fresh folder. That's going to be the folder for your project, and then from there, like we can move along. Okay. So Node.js installed, Visual Studio Code installed, and you can look into the tutorial itself. If you go ahead, it's okay because you may have questions later, so that's fine. But if you have some other stuff to do, that's okay. Just be sure that you're back with us at 10 a.m. Pacific time code. So that's going to be like 1 p.m. Eastern time. And I will see you back in a bit then. So actually, I can stay for a couple more minutes if you guys have any other questions. I answered a couple of ones already. Okay. Any other questions before I go away and make myself some coffee? Music playing in the background. What's going on? Okay. Any final questions before I go away? Okay. All right. So yeah. So go ahead, take care of that. I do see a couple. Yes. So if the recording is going to be shared with you guys, yes, it will. So we're going to be pausing recording from time to time, so that way it doesn't become like this gigantic over 8 hours recording. So yeah, so I will say after we're done with the bootcamp week, we will be posting a blog post where you're gonna have a chance to get those links for you to visualize the recordings. So in case you cannot join later on today, or you have something that you want to revisit and then just look into it again, you can always come back to those recordings. Okay, so for now, let me pause my recording and then we will come back at 10 a.m. Pacific time coast. So any questions, please just leave them on the Q&A. I will be coming back from time to time. I actually do have to do some work. So I'll catch you guys in a bit. Okay, and let me ask you guys, Yes, it is nice to be back. I agree. All right. So let me ask you guys if you were okay with the setup of the account, the initiation of the Forge application, and then also the development runtime and editor installation. So the Node.js side of it, and also the Visual Studio Code. And then let me move ahead. So for our next session, we're going to have a setup for the basic server, and at the same time also the initiation of the authentication setup. But before I move on, I want to ask you guys any questions from the first session. Anything goes, and if you don't have any questions, I can continue, but as of now, I'm going to give it a little bit less than a minute. So we'll just hang out and chill here for a bit. And then you guys can tell me if you have questions. And if you prefer to also ask the question through audio, just raise a hand and I can unmute your mic. So that way you can quickly ask the question and then we can move forward with that. So get my list. Some of you have come back, some other ones are still not around. So it is 1 p.m. We're gonna give it a little bit of time. I think I started maybe 1 or 2 minutes before that. Let's see, do we have anything else? I don't see any other questions as of now. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. So I guess I'm gonna keep going. All right. Okay, so thank you again for joining me. What are we gonna be doing now? So now we're gonna be focusing into like I said, the setup for the initiation of the server, and then also at the same time the authentication part. So here it's a diagram of kind of like the sample structure that we have for the application that we're going to be building today. So on the server side, we're looking to basically get the value of a token, something that we're going to be authenticated with the use of our API keys that we obtained on the previous session. So in our account, we already have the API keys. As you noticed also, we said that we needed 3 of the services that are part of Autodesk Forge, in this case, data management, model derivative, and then authentication that it's kind of like already enabled by default because you're getting the API keys. That means you're going to have to authenticate. And this step basically means that we cannot do anything with the platform unless we are authenticated. Like the system needs to know who we are, who's the one trying to actually utilize those services, because if there are some kind of charges with the use of cloud credits, we need to know who actually we need to be charging for that. So, and then after that, once we have that token, we have a way to actually pass that into the client side and obtain just the token, not our API keys. Those API keys stay on the server side in order for security reasons to not get exposed. So, but from the client side, we have a way to do an API call in order to obtain the value of that token and pass it on into the different services that we're going to be using through the use of the application. An authentication to create a bucket, to list the buckets that my account has access to upload a file, to request a translation of that specific file, to later on basically visualize the file that we translated, right? So everything always needs this kind of authentication. So that's the reason we built one on the server side and then also on the client side. Okay. All right. So steps to take now. So we're going to be initializing a new project, a new node project. and we're gonna start installing all the dependencies that this project is gonna be using. We're gonna be creating also a launch configuration file. In Visual Studio Code, there is a way to say, I'm going to debug this or add a configuration to this using a specific language. In this case, we're going to be using Node.js. So we can say we're going to be adding a configuration, but it's a Node.js configuration. And the system will basically create the launch.json file that we're going to be able to modify and then start including values, for example, for the API keys, that those are going to get passed on through the debugging process and not to be exposed within the web itself in order to anyone else to get them, okay? We will also start preparing the configuration data inside of a file that we're going to be naming config.js, okay? And I'll explain a little bit more while I'm actually going through this. Same thing about, we're going to be creating a basic Express server. So, Express, basically, it's part of Node.js. It's a way to route those files into a small server that it's defining to which endpoints and everything is going to go. And then later on, we're going to be creating a router for the authentication endpoints, which is kind of like one of the benefits of using something like Node.js and Express server and so on, that we can route those information of data to go through the server itself and then give us that access, okay? So with that, I'm going to move into demo time. So let me stop my sharing and switch screens. Okay, so where are we? Let me try to do. This is one. Just trying to set up everything before we move into this. Okay, so where are you guys? Okay, so desktop one. Kill this. All right. And I think you can see my Learn Forge page, right? So we went through this process, creating the app, got into the tools, we selected Node.js, we installed Node.js in case we didn't have it, we installed Visual Studio Code in case we didn't have it. Now we're going to go into authentication. And when it comes to authentication, the platform itself uses two different kinds of authentication. It is based on an Auth 2 standard. So everything across the platform itself, it's token-based authentication. And we have two types of authentication. We have a two-legged workflow and a three-legged workflow. For the tutorial that we're going to be doing today, it's going to be a two-legged workflow. Basically, it is us as the developer of the application communicating and asking for authorization to the cloud server where the Forge platform is running. So if you think about it, it's only two parties involved. So we have a two-legged token in there. Tomorrow, if you attend that session, when you want to have access to user data, in this case, something like, for example, BIM 360 or ACC, the developer itself will request the cloud server access to data that it's part of user A data. But the server itself needs to ask user A if they allow the access from your application to their data. And if they say yes, basically, we get authenticated. And now we can visualize the user data itself. And this kind of works a little bit more when you're doing integrations. So let's say you use BIM 360 and you want to do a certain kind of integrations to a separate app, have access to your data in order for you to visualize, I don't know, let's say data reports, export to Excel functionality, or data transfer between one cloud storage to another, but you don't remember that you cannot modify BIM 360 as the product itself, but you can extract the data and then access your data itself through the use of Forge. Then we move into scopes. So scopes are basically the kind of permissions that we're giving our token to get access to it. For example, if we have a token that has data.read scope, this allows me to do a reading of data from that account. Reading data could be something like reading also a derivative that got translated for the viewer. But let's say if we want to create a bucket, data read's not going to let me do that. So we're going to have to start using some other kind of scopes like bucket create, or we want to read buckets. If we want to create data, we want to write data or visualize the models. We do have different kind of scopes and everything. Some of them we treat them as public, some other ones that's internal. So what that means is that if we have a token that has this kind of scope, the viewables read, and that token is exposed, it's okay. Why? Because if someone uses that token to try to access buckets, it doesn't have the right permission, right? It only can visualize files, and they need to know the path to that file in order to get access to it, which is a in code base 64 string, and you will see it later on. But when your application needs to do creation of buckets and so on, it needs to happen on the server side, which basically will be when those internal tokens are going to get used, and they're going to be securely stored into your server in order to not get exposed outside of that. Okay, so it's always quite something that you got to look into it. Other than that, like you can have like some kind of security issues and so on. So we want to avoid that. Okay, so let's move into view your models, which is the one that we're going to be working on today. And we're going to be doing this first two parts as of this session right now. So we go into create a server. And since we're going to be using Node.js in this session, we're going to get started with that part. So like I showed you before, there is a way for you to access an integrated terminal that VS Code has available for you. And then from there, we can start initializing our Node project with the command of npm init. And the only thing is that when we start npm init, and we create that package JSON file, it's going to ask us which is going to be our entry point for the Node project to actually run. And as a default, it's always index.js, but in this case, we're going to change that value to be start.js. And then from there, we're going to start adding later on packages into that package JSON, where we're going to add Express. Since we said we're going to use Node.js Express, we're going to be using Multer, which I will explain Multer what does it do later on. And then we're going to be using the Forge API's Node module, which we need, since other than that, we're going to have to rewrite the functions to do almost everything we're doing. But we took care of that part, so you can just invoke those functions and use them. Okay. So once that it's done, our package JSON is going to look something like this, where we say that the main file is going to be start.js. We have a couple of scripts. If we do npm start, it's going to do node start.js. We're not going to use that one though, but it's always good to have it there. Setup of the author, the type of license, can be ISC or MIT, it doesn't matter. Then the dependencies, which in this case are the packages that we're going to be installing. Okay. So let me take care of that right now. Okay. So, and let me see if I can make this a bit bigger. That way you guys can see it. Water reminder again. So let me clean the terminal. Let me just open the Q&A and the chat because that way I can have it next to me in case you guys have any questions as I'm going through this. Okay, and I think we can do some sort of kind of like split screen to, oh no, actually I can move back and forth. So first part, we're gonna do npm init with an entry point to the start.js. Okay, so we are here. And let's do Bootcamp September 2021. Yep, so we're gonna do npm init. So this basically is gonna start creating a package name called Bootcamp September 2021. So we're gonna hit enter. Is it gonna be version 1.0.0? Yes. Description, Bootcamp Forge 2021. Entry point. So this is what I said. The default one is index.js, but for our sample, we're gonna be using start.js. Test command, we can leave it empty. We're not gonna be using the test commands from Node. Actually, we're gonna be using the debugger from Visual Studio Code. Git repository, we don't have one assigned yet, so we can leave this blank as well. Keywords, let's say Forge, author, Jaime. License, it can be ISC, we can leave it like that, or you can do MIT if you want. And then it gives you a preview of how this package JSON is gonna look. So if we look into it, we have a JSON structure with the name, Bootcamp September 2021, a Bootcamp Forge 2021, main start.js, not index.js, so make sure that this is correct. If it's not correct, just type no. The script, keywords, author, license. Looks okay? Yes. Okay. So now, if you notice, we have a new package JSON file. So if we open this, it basically looks, let me move this. It looks like the preview that we just got, right? So now we need to start adding what kind of dependencies this package JSON or this project itself is going to have. Since it's a Node project, we're going to be adding some npm modules to it. Okay, so let me clean this up, and we're going to do npm install Forge APIs, and then we're going to do --save because we need to add it into the package JSON and not to be removed after that. So we do this. Takes a second. So now you see we got it into our dependencies. So now our first dependency is the Forge APIs npm, the node package module. And if you also notice, we got two new things actually that show up here. The package-block.json, which actually we do not need this. It's just a registry of what is going on with the project itself. But if you notice, we got a new folder, which is called no modules. And no modules might have a lot of modules, but the one that we want to focus the most on it's going to be the Forge APIs. So we have the Forge APIs here, and then this has the sources to all the different functions that we need, like create bucket, or if we go to a delete bucket. So all this is included into it, and we can invoke it directly from our project. Okay, so now, but we are missing some of those packages that the tutorial actually needs. So we're gonna get back, and then we need two more, Express and Multer. So we're gonna do the same thing again. npm install, I'm a bit lazy, I don't wanna type that again. So we're gonna do just Express. Yep, save, good. Cool, add it. Now we're gonna do Multer. Save in order to the package JSON to add it. So now if we look into our package JSON, we have more dependencies. We have Express, higher, or this being the minimum kind of like version required. Same thing for Forge APIs, and same thing for Multer. Okay. So now, if we go back to here, we have installed this tree. Like I said, the -- save parameter indicates that the module should be included into the package JSON as a dependency. So this step is quite important. So be sure not to miss it. So now once we open the package JSON, like I showed you before, main is going to have start.js, and then it's going to be express, Forge APIs, Multer. Okay. Now we need to create a couple of like files and folders into our project in order to start getting like some structure with it. Okay. So if we notice, we have the no modules missing here, but we have package.json. And then we create two folders, one for public files and one for the routes. So everything that is going to be server-based is going to go into the routes. Everything that we want to show on the client side, so basically the front end, it's going to go into the public folder. Okay. And then we're going to also add the configuration to do launch JSON. So let me do these two things quickly. Okay, so now we can click on this side here. We're gonna add a folder, public. We're gonna click again outside, because other than that, if we leave this one pressed and then we open a new folder, it's gonna create a subfolder public, and we don't want that yet. So we're gonna do routes. I think it's routes. It is routes. Okay. So now launch.json. And like I said, sorry again. We're going to go to the menu where it says debug. In Visual Studio Code, we're going to add a configuration. We're going to select the environment being Node.js. And there, it's going to create a subfolder called .vscode, which basically will not show in the structure when something gets added into Git. We can avoid every folder that has a dot at the beginning, so that way it doesn't go into it. Basically, your API keys do not get exposed into GitHub or something like that. And then we're gonna come and copy this to replace the default structure of that launch JSON with our new structure. So in that way, we have a chance to include our Forge client ID here and our Forge client secret here. Okay. So let's copy this. Let's go back here. And we're gonna do, I think it's on a change. It's not debug, now it's run. So now run, we're gonna do add configuration. It's gonna start doing some stuff. It's probably, I haven't opened VS Code in a couple of weeks. So we're just gonna give it a second. Once this finishes, now we have the option. So now we can do .NET Core, Chrome, Edge, Launch, but we're focused into the Node.js one. So we do Node.js. Okay, so let me make this thing a bit smaller. So if you see, it kind of looks in some ways similar to what we have on the other one, right? So we have the type, the request, the name, program, blah, blah, blah. Version, configurations, kind of looks very similar, but we have some stuff that we want to use. So we can do a quickly Command A to select all and then replace it with our structure. And then we save this. And now your client ID and client secret are actually going to go here. So inside of the quotes, it's where you're going to be placing your client ID. So let me go to app, copy the client ID, and then select this and paste it. So this is how your string for the client ID and the client secret should look like. I'm not gonna add my secret right now. I will add it later, but this is basically what you have to do. And if you see, we also have a Forge callback URL that is already placed with the value that we give you at the beginning of the tutorial. So you don't have to worry about that part yet as well. Okay, so that's gonna be the launch.json, no modules, public, routes, and the package JSON. So now let's go back here, and then we need to create that start.js file. Since it's going to be our entry point for the project to actually read it, we're going to be needing to create that file as well at the root level of our project. Okay, so you can do a quickly copy of this, and I will walk you through. So again, let's select outside. Now we're not going to create a folder. We're going to create a file. We're going to call it start.js. We paste this here. And basically what this is doing is it's going to be using a couple of Node modules. We're going to be using path, which is already part of some of the other ones. That's the reason we didn't do npm install path, because it comes in from either the Forge APIs or the Express. But we're going to be using that in order to give this location how to find a path. Then later on, we're going to be requiring Express because we're going to be using Express. The constant port, if you specify a certain port, you can pass it in as an environmental variable. And if not, it defaults to 3000. So localhost 3000, basically, it's what we're going to be using for debugging. Then it's going to get a requirement of the configuration from the file /config. So basically what this means is going to be finding a file in this level that is going to be called config. We don't have it yet, but it's something that we got to actually create right after this. And then inside of config, it's where we check if the client ID is present and also the secret. In case that it's not, we are going to give you a console error saying we have one of the two or the two API keys missing. So this is a good identifier for you to know that you have your API keys missing. You need to enter them. And then we're going to be using Express in order to route everything into, basically use everything within the public folder to pass it on to the client side, and then also doing some routing of everything that comes in from the file OAuth routes or the OSS routes to be passed on into the client side for us to be able to call it directly from there. Okay, same thing for model derivative. And these ones are the ones that we're going to be creating in a bit. And these ones are on the server side. And then on the front end, we're going to be able to pass in a get to this to already know which way it has to go and look for it. Okay. And then we're just going to give a small console log saying the server is listening on the port and the port value, either the one that you give or the 3000 as the default. Okay. So this is the start.js. Save this file. Let's go back here. So basically, this file starts an Express server and serves the static files, like something like the HTML and the API request from what I explained before, the public, and then also the requirement of the API request and the routes. Okay, so now we're going to do the config.js file because we are actually using that file in the start.js, but we don't have it yet, so it doesn't exist. And it's actually quite simple because basically it's exporting the values of credentials and then credentials dot and then client ID, client secret, callback URL. And if you see, we're reading it from the process environment that our launch.json is actually pass it on at the time that we start debugging our project. And then also, since the token needs scopes, like permissions, like I mentioned before, we do have a way to give those, either use this ones for internal or use this one for a public. And then in our project, you're going to be seeing that we do a reference to which kind of internal or external or internal, public or internal kind of token we're going to be using. Okay. So we define that. And then at the time of running that Express server, those values are going to be passed on into the variables, like I said before. And yeah, this is pretty much what I just said. At the end of this part, we're going to be seeing the VS Code with launch JSON inside of it. We're going to be seeing the public folder, the routes folder, the config.js file, package lock, package JSON, start.js, and we're missing in this picture the no module one. Okay, so let me copy this one, go here, select again, outside of it, new file, config.js. And then again, so we have config.js, process environment, client ID, secrets, scopes, I think we're good. So now if we go here and then we see this, you see that it's already telling me what's going to be the path of that file itself. If we go to definition, it brings me back to that file that we just created. So that means that what we are referring to, it's already part of that. Okay. All right. So let me see, where else do I have to go? Because I think I have something else. It doesn't matter if you see the screen, it's fine. So initialize, done. Create a new launch, done. Configuration, done. Start.js, done. Oh, create routes for authentication endpoints. Okay, so last step. So we go into authenticate now. And again, two-legged authentication, that's what we're going to be using. And then we're going to be selecting, again, the Node.js language. And then inside of here, we're going to be creating, inside of routes, since we already created the routes folder, right? We're going to be creating a file called Oauth.js. So we're going to be creating this Oauth.js, which this basically will create the express router for all the OAuth related endpoints. So again, in here, we're going to be using Express. We're going to be requiring from a folder called common in a file called auth, which we haven't created yet. But we're going to be requiring the use of a get public token to later on start a router and then get the token, okay, passing in the values for the access token and the expiration time. And then this will give us back a token, okay? So, and then, like I said, it's referring to something that doesn't exist yet. But if you look a little bit below here, now we have routes folder. Now we have a new folder inside of this, which is the common one. And then we have another file called auth.js. And we named it the same. So, but since it's inside of a different folder, it doesn't, it's basically technically not the same file because it's in a different path. So, and then from here, we also get a requirement from the Forge APIs module to give us the auth client to leg it. Then also from config, you remember the config file that we just created at the root level to get config, because we're going to be getting the values for the credentials. So we need client ID and client secret. Use the auth client to leg it, passing in the values of the ID, secret, scopes, or the config scopes internal, depending on what do we select. Doing a couple of functions for, let's say, getting a token, getting client with the passing of the scopes, assigning the authentication with the credentials, setting an expiration time based on the date now that we have on the computer, plus the credentials dot expirations in times 1000. So this gives us a wide range of expiration of that token itself. And then we have a couple other functions to do get public token and get internal token. And the only thing that changes is what we pass on into the get token function that we basically just created here, okay? So there is like some kind of mapping and setup here with the different functions, but to later on export those, the get client, the get public token, and the get internal token, okay? And then I think if you see, we have it, we use it here. So if we want to use something else like the get internal token, we can redo the use of this and then just basically invoke to that function. So let me add this to my setup. So we're going to be adding routes auth.js. Let's copy this one. So inside of routes, we're going to do a file, auth.js. Okay, so now we have this. We save it. We don't have this yet. So if we kind of hover, it doesn't do anything. But now we're going to click again to routes. Now we're going to have a folder. That folder is called common. Okay. Now, leaving common pressed, we're going to add a new file, auth.js. Like I said, it might look like the same, but it's not. It's in a different path, so that makes it a different file. So yeah, so now we created that. So now we can get this code, get it into here. And like I said before, these are different kind of calls to, so if we go to definition, this is where it gets defined. And then get client, it's inside of that OAuth client to leg it. If we go to definition, goes into get client, which is about here. And then get client will be using OAuth client to leg it. That if we go to definition, you see how we jump into something else that it's not kind of like part of it. Let me move this thing so that way you see it. So you see we jump into Node modules, Forge APIs, and now we're up to the OAuth client two-legged. So this is basically the function that it's built inside of the Node module that it's going to be doing that authentication for us. And then there is some other functions that get referred to here, which are also written here. So if you want to dive deeper, you can always go into this part and then start looking into the NPM for the Forge APIs. Okay. So now we have this. I think everything looks okay. So we can save. So if we do another go to definition, it sends us to the correct place. So I think we're good in that regard. So, and then one thing I will kind of like enforce in you guys, so that way you pay attention. Always make sure that you are at the right level, because most of the times, whenever we are doing some questions from partners and customers, that something in the project doesn't work. It doesn't run like it's supposed to. And with a simple move of a file to a right location, everything starts working. So whenever you're doing something like this, I think always pay attention to where those files are located. In this case, like I said, we have routes, and inside of routes, we have one auth.js, but then we have another folder as a subfolder routes that also has its own auth.js. And if you see, they're actually at a different level. And then config.js, it's not inside of routes, it's actually outside. So just pay attention to that part. Okay, so is this the last part of here? Yeah. Let me see. I think this is it for this part. So let me switch back to my slides. Yep. Okay. So now we went through the list, right? So we initialized the new NPM project, installed the dependencies. We created the launch configuration. We prepared the configuration, which in this case is the config.js. And I'm looking this side because I have a second screen. We did the start.js file. And then also we create the router for the authentication endpoints. So I think we are good into that regard. Let me go ahead. And okay, so now your turn. You're gonna go through all the steps that I just basically went over. I'm gonna leave you this list here, so in that way you guys can remember what you're gonna be doing. And the next session, so session 3, it's gonna be back at 12 p.m. Pacific Time Coast. For me right now, it's a little bit over 1:30, so 1:39. I went over for like 9 minutes on that part, but that's okay. So yeah, so you have I will see you again at 12 p.m. Pacific time coast. So that way we can go over any questions or any doubts that you might have in regards to this. I will say again, and I will encourage you again to do the Q&A. So if you have any questions, just send them over there. I will be around here from time to time so I can catch up on the questions. If it's easier for me to answer like live, I will answer at the time that I come back. If it's a simple question that I can quickly solve or I spot it at the time that you guys write it, I can also answer immediately. So that way I don't block you for some time, but I will be around here. So yeah, good luck. Let me know if I can help you in any way. Send me a chat message or just a Q&A in there. And I will see you back at 12 p.m. And new question. For the following session, would it be possible to get the recordings of the webinars without... Yes, so the working breaks are actually gonna be split up. If you notice at the beginning of the first session, my part that I do, after I finish, I pause the recording. And then when I start again the second session, I continue the recording, then pause the recording again, which is what I'm gonna do right now, actually. Resume recording. Okay, and I think it is 3 o'clock. Yep, so 12 p.m. Pacific. And welcome back. If you are on the East Coast, I hope you had a great lunch. If you are still not had lunch yet, hopefully you'll get to get it in a few. So we're gonna go ahead and move into the third part of the session. So this is gonna be focused now into the uploading and the translating of the models. Let me hit over here so that way I can see what I'm showing you. Yep. So, but before I move into that, I want to ask, did everything went well? Nothing actually runs at this moment. So it was just a matter of actually going through the list of, and actually let me get back so that way. I'm going through the list of starting your Node project, installing the dependencies, creating the launch configuration, preparing the configuration data with the config.js, express server with the start.js, which is going to be our main entry point, and then also creating the router for the authentication endpoints with the folder structure correctly and so on. So if everything is a yes on those 5 things, and if you don't have any questions, I think we can continue and move to the next part. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes for you to say, yes, all good, or no, I have a question. And I'm going to open up my chat again. And I think, oh, there we go, we have a question. All right, so let me see. Oh, good. Oh, okay, awesome. That kind of assurement also works. So thanks again, Joe. All right, so let me move on then. Let's keep going. All right, so next up for session 3, our next steps, it's going to be to now add also to that same router folder the endpoints that we need with the use of the data management API. So basically, we're going to be creating a couple of endpoints in order to first create buckets, second, uploading files to those buckets, and also third, listing the buckets that we have available within our account, and at the same time also all the objects, which in this case are the files that are part or available in that bucket that we created. And then also we are going to start adding the necessary endpoints for the conversion, the translation of those files that use model derivative API. Okay, so for that, let's get started. And yeah, this might happen. So let me stop my share. I'm going to move into first this thing, upload file. Where are you guys? Yep. All right. Awesome. So I went from the final part of authentication, right, up to the initialization of the upload file to the object storage service, short for OSS. Okay, so in Forge.js, this is basically where we are going to store the objects inside of buckets. So buckets are basically, let's think about it as containers in the cloud. Maybe kind of like a folder or just a storage location itself. If you have used AWS in the past, Amazon Web Services, you know that they have a service, it's called S3, Simple Storage Service. And in there, you have a chance to create buckets. So Forge is basically hosted on AWS. So these buckets are basically quite similar. So basically from there, we have a couple of retention policies that we can give to those buckets. We know that you may not want to keep your files forever in that location. So we give you the option of you defining the retention policy of those files. So each bucket needs to get a retention policy defined. And the ones that we have available within the platform are 3 of them. Transient basically works as a cache-like storage, allows you to keep the translation of those files up to 24 hours, okay? So this tutorial, it's already set for you to create buckets with the transient policy, okay? So it's already set up like that, but I'm going to show you where in the code you could change that if you want to. You could change it to one of the other 2 policies that we have. Temporary, basically it's a storage that persists for 30 days. So let's say you have an application and you wanna give your users a chance to kind of like upload files, create translations, visualize their models, but also kind of give them the room for them to show it to someone else with a sharing link or something like that. And it's valid for 30 days. So yeah, you can use this one. Now, let's say you have an application that you want to keep your files there until you decide that you don't want to have them anymore. So in this case, we're going to be using the retention policy of persistent. And basically, this policy keeps the files forever until you decide to delete it, okay? So you can use the endpoints to delete the objects or even the endpoint to delete the bucket itself. So we're going to be creating those endpoints. And again, one thing that we got to keep in mind is bucket names need to be, one, do not need to have any kind of strange characters. So that's one thing. The other thing is that names need to be unique. So they need to be unique across all the users of Amazon Web Services buckets. So that means if you try to make a bucket called test, most likely someone already did it. But to avoid that kind of problem, in the code of this sample, we have created kind of like a hidden prefix assigned to the name. So what we're doing is, and I will show you this in the code as well, what we are doing is that the UI itself, when it runs on the website, if you type test, it's going to work. And it's going to show you a bucket named test. But from the API, if you give a call to list all your buckets, you're not going to find test. You're going to find your client ID, all in lower cases, dash test. So this is what it's basically saying here. So this tutorial will prefix the bucket key with your Forge client ID transparently, which should avoid duplicated names, okay? So keep that in mind. So whenever you start building your own application, and if you want to use buckets and so on, something to keep in mind is that names need to be unique. And one good way actually to making something unique, it's by assigning a prefix to that name. It can be some kind of hash code. It can be like a timestamp or something like that. So you could do that. And then later on, if you don't want your users to actually see this weird number at the beginning, you can just basically display the UI, just the final part of the name that they gave it to you. Okay? All right, so let's move into the uploading file to OSS. So now in this section, we need 3 features, right? So we're gonna need, like I said, creation of the bucket, listing of the bucket and the objects, and uploading the objects. Okay, when I say objects, I'm meaning files. Okay, so again, we're gonna create inside of the routes folder, which we already have, an oss.js file with the following content. Oops, sorry, my mouse actually, I think my hands are a little bit too warm, so this sensor itself kind of like acts up sometimes. So this is quite a large file, but let me copy it and go over a bit more in the code. So again, we're back here. We are back into routes. So remember, at the routes level, not inside of common, routes level, which we're gonna create oss.js. And here we're gonna paste this. Okay, so now what is going on here? We have a couple of requirements to this. So basically, we are going to have a requirement for FS, which is basically the file system itself. With a node, we need to use this in order to interact with different files and so on. Same thing for the Express, because it's an Express server, and then also with Multer. I think I don't want to say the definition of Multer yet. It's somewhere down here in the comments, so it's going to explain it a little bit more. And then also from the Forge APIs, in this case, we're going to be using Buckets API, Objects API, and Post Bucket payloads. From the common auth, do you remember we have common and auth, we're going to be getting the client, okay? But in this case also, we're going to be using the internal token. Since this is happening on the server side, we need to actually keep this token securely and not to be exposed on the UI. Okay, so and then we're gonna start the router with the Express router. So first, we need to get a token, right? So we use the router in order to call the function of getInternalToken, which lives within the common auth. So if we just go back again, common auth, getInternalToken. So getInternalToken basically calls getToken, passing in the internal scopes, goes into getToken. We are here in getToken now. We start getting the token itself, and then we do getClient. And getClient gets the value of scopes, which we are actually sending inside. And now we are going to be assigning the values from the credentials to client ID and secret. And those values are going to go into the Node.js, NPM, sorry, for the Forge API's SDK. So now once it gets into here, our return is going to be basically a token that has the scope internal defined. Okay. So then we move into this next router. Basically, this is going to be a get buckets. Okay. So it says get API Forge OSS buckets. So expect the query param ID. If the param is hash or empty, it will return a JSON with the list of the buckets. Otherwise, returns a JSON with the list of the objects in the buckets with a given name. So that's kind of like, if the call itself is just to get the buckets, it will list out the buckets. If we open that bucket, We already have the value of the bucket, so we need to get back whatever is inside. And that's what we're going to start listing the rest of the things. And then here, we're going to be invoking a new API that is part of the SDK, which is the buckets API. That from here, we can get the buckets. And we're defining a limit of 100 at the time that we show and display the buckets itself. Passing in authorization client, authorization token. Let's see what else. We define the ID of the bucket key, basically the hash name with the name itself. The text that it's gonna be showing, it's gonna be that bucket key, but it's gonna replace, like I told you, the client ID, 2 lowercase dash the name of the bucket key, which is basically this one. And then it's gonna say that it's a type bucket and that it's basically a children of that. So if it's not a bucket, what we are, if we don't have a bucket name and the bucket name is also a hash, we go in here. If not, we come in here and we start listing the objects. So we start getting the objects from that bucket itself, in case there is any. And same thing again. We get IDs from the basics before that it's enlisted in there, and then we translate into showing what is going to be displayed on the UI with the object key of the text. Post buckets, basically this will create a new bucket. Again, passing in configuration, credentials, client ID, 2 lowercase dash the name of the bucket key. This gets entered by you guys. So if you remember on the Giphy, basically it pops up a window. You have a text field that you can fill out, and you can type there the name of the bucket. This is gonna be your bucket key. But since I told you, we need to make it unique. So we're adding a prefix with the client credential, client ID, in order to be lowercase. And now the payload policy, basically it's here. So in line 64, when you create a bucket, this is where you can change like the policy of those buckets. So if you remember, we have transient for 24 hours, temporary for 30 days, and persistent for the time being until you decide to delete it. So in case you want to change it, and we can actually do this. So now we're going to have expires in, instead of 24, 30 days. Okay. So this is just, I'm doing this just for you guys to understand where actually this is going to happen. But the default itself, it's set up for the 24 hours. But feel free to change it if you want to. Just make sure that you're typing the word correctly. Or in that, it's going to give you an error and you're not going to know what's going on. Okay, so then it creates the bucket, passes in what we need, which is the payload, which is basically the definition of the 2 things that we need to pass in into that API call. The Oauth client and the token, which also we need the token for that. Okay. And for the next part, which is the uploading of the new objects to the given bucket. So this is we're gonna be using Molter. So Molter basically is what we use in order to upload that data stream of the files up to the bucket itself. Okay, so, and I will show you a link to read a little bit more about what this Molter actually is doing. But in summary, basically we use it here by passing it again into a different kind of section again in the SDK with the objects API to upload the object. Uploading object needs a location, which in this case is going to be the bucket. To where is it going to go? What's going to be the name? What's going to be the data length? The data, the authentication client, and the authentication token, in order for us to be able to completely upload all the bytes that are pertaining to that file that or object that we're uploading. And then we're going to export the router of all those 3 routes that we define. Okay. So let me save this one. Let's go back here. Okay, so in the UI, we are planning to use something, it's called JS3. So we are gonna need to do those calls with defined endpoint on the client side, which is gonna be kind of like a fetch to a get API Forgeviewer bucket, which in this case, it's what I explained to you before here, that it's gonna be pointing to this router, which is only called buckets, okay? And then Multer module to handle the file upload. It saves the file in our server so we can later upload it into Forge. So you can click in here in order to learn a little bit more about what Express Multer it's doing and so on. But basically it's just to keep like a local storage in our project to later on being able to actually use it at the time that we upload it. And now we're gonna be, let's see, we reuse authentication helpers in the minimal for this router. So you notice that we did reuse all the authentication helpers that we needed. So I think in that regard, it's basically, again, using the endpoints that we define into the common Auauth.js file. Next up, we're gonna be translating the file. So, and this taps into using a new service within the Forge platform, which in this case, it's the model derivative. So model derivative basically grabs your source file and you have different kind of outputs for this source file. So we have a file translation, right? So we can grab 60 plus different file formats. Like I said, Autodesk and also non-Autodesk. And then we can turn it into a file format that can be a little bit more universal. Let's think about it like maybe an OBJ or an STL if we're doing like 3D printing or something like that. But also one of the outputs, it's an SBF. And in this case, it's going to be an SBF2, which is our new type of file. It just basically loads faster. It has like more access to loading larger files, especially Navisworks, that they tend to have quite a lot of data and also triangles on the geometry. They tend to load a lot faster, which is one of the reasons that we are basically migrated into that. So yeah, so that's one of the outputs from there. At the same time, also you get information about the thumbnails. So let's say you want to create an application, a website that's going to give you kind of like a gallery look of the previews of the models that you have available for your customers to visualize and so on. We do give you PNGs of those thumbnails. Let's say you are not very focused into the entire file, but you're kind of like, I always use this example, but let's say you're a supplier of windows, and then you only care about the geometry and the geometry information from the windows of that specific model. So you can do extraction of geometry individually, or just the ones that matches a certain category with this derivative. And then also, let's say you don't care about the geometrical part, you only care about the data because you're feeding some kind of like ERP system or something like that. You can do a data extraction and then everything will come out to you in a JSON format for you to later on interact with that. Okay, so those are some of the outputs that we have available within the model derivative. And this is what we're going to be using with this sample today, which is basically a post job. So it's an asynchronous process that sends your source file to the server to get processed and give you back an encoded base64 path to where in your bucket it's located the translation. So when the viewer actually invokes that URN, we will be able to identify where it's actually stored and that it's completely translated, and then we can visualize it. Okay, so let's do this. So let's go into Node.js and then the translate model. And let me just I want to make sure that I'm not going over conversion endpoints. Yes, we're good. Okay, So we are gonna go into creating a model-derivative.js file within the routes again with the following content. So again, Express, since this is an Express server, so we need this all the time. And different kind of functions in order to kind of like filter down from that Forge API, which is going to be using the derivatives API, the job payload input, output, and Java SPF output payload. Again, from the common auth, we need the get internal token and the get client, which is very similar to the file that we did before. Again, middleware for obtaining the token with the router to get the internal token. And then similarly, another route to the jobs one now, which is going to be later on called from the client side as a post call to API Forge model derivative jobs. So this will be passing in the information from the client side in order to process what kind of input are we going to be giving. So once we have this, it's going to give us back the URN of the translated file in order for us to later on visualize it into the viewer, okay? And at this point, when we're done with this is how your project tree structure should look like. Again, launch.json. If you did not add the client ID and client secret to the launch.json, remember to do it, because other than that, when we run it, it's not going to do anything because there's no API keys. So we need to make sure that they are actually part of that and also saved. Inside of the routes, we have the subfolder of common, Oauth.js, but outside at the routes level, we have model derivative.js, Oauth.js, and the OSS.js that we just created. So let me copy this one. Go into routes again. I always do this double click just to make sure that I am at the right location. So this is going to be called model derivative.js. This, and again, express. Oops, sorry, I think I clicked the wrong thing. So yeah, so express the constant for the different kind of API calls that we're going to be using that are coming in from the derivatives API function. And then from there, we can do the translation by passing in the value of the job, which is basically we assign everything into that payload, the Auth client and the Auth token to give us back a result of status 200 in case it's successful. If not, we give an error. And then export again of that same route there. Okay. And then if you see this, post API Forge model derivative jobs, and then / jobs. So focus on this thing here, because if we go into our start.js, we know that from routes model derivative, basically we are going to be focusing to this. Okay. So a key, like here, what we are just missing is the / jobs. But then when we build our client side, you will see that there is invoking into those endpoints. So routing this, it's already kind of like defined from the beginning that this is the route that we're going to be taking. So in that way, our client side, it's going to know where to go into the routes in order to process that to later on continue. Okay, so let me save this and let me get back here. So again, the job endpoints receives the object name and it posted the translation job to extract the 2D, 3D views of the model. To summarize at this point, your Node.js project should look like this. Okay. So let me switch back to my slides. And I hope you're still around. I do see a couple of people there, which is good to have you. I just hope you haven't fell asleep yet. I don't know if it's coffee time for the East Coast or lunchtime for the West Coast. So I think So what's now your turn? So we're going to be adding, like I said, the router for the data management endpoints, which is going to be the creation of the bucket, the uploading of the files, listing of the buckets and objects, and later on also adding the router for the conversion endpoints, which in this case is the model derivative API. Okay, so, and then session 4 will get started. Ooh, I'm right on time. Awesome. So session 4 will get started at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So I will see you in about an hour and a half, something like that. For the last section of our tutorial, which basically it's going to be connecting everything together, building up the client side and debugging this to test it out in our own browser, and then just making sure that everything went smooth. I want to say thank you again for joining us. So I will catch you up in a couple of minutes, like 90 minutes. Okay. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A. I will be checking from time to time. Same thing for the chat. You can send me a chat message there if you desire to. Okay. So I'm going to pause my recording. Ooh, my mouse is acting up again. Okay, so welcome back. As of now, you should have done the setup of the endpoints for the data management router and also the conversion router endpoints. How did that go? Did anyone have any troubles with it? Are we good to go? Do you have any questions that I can help you out with? Please let me know on the chat and also on the Q&A. And if everything seems okay, I think I can continue with the last section of the training. So for this last section, we're basically going to put together all the different pieces, and we're going to be loading the models into the viewer. So this is going to be the client side part. We're done with the server side, so no more Node.js. This is going to be purely HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as of now. So any questions in regard to that or the previous stuff, please just feel free to leave them on the Q&A section, or send also a chat message. And I hope you guys are back with me. This is getting recorded either way, but I think we should be okay in that regard. What I see, we do have around the same people. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so let's continue. So what's gonna be for this next set of steps? So basically, we're gonna be creating our index.html, the layout for the application with some styling using main CSS file, and then we'll be adding the JavaScript code for the bucket and object tree handling, and then the JavaScript code for the Forgeviewer. Okay. So what that means is that we're going to have to create this 4 files within the project. So yeah, let's get started with that. Okay, so let me stop my share and switch screens. Good here. Yep. Okay. So last part was basically the model derivative. We should be up to this part right now. So let's move into the show on the viewer. So the viewer itself, like I said, purely is going to be HTML, JavaScript, So let's get started. So we're going to be choosing the Node.js, which is the one that we've been doing. So in the public folder, we're going to get a bit organized with this. So we're going to create the following content. We're going to create two folders, a JS folder and a CSS folder. In the index.html, it's going to be at the same level as the JS and CSS folder. Okay, not inside of any of these two, and not inside of another folder, just call it like HTML. So no, so just on this part. So once we do that, we're gonna get started with the add-on of the index.html. So actually, I think we can copy this. So let's move back into here. We're gonna go to public, and we're gonna start with index.html. Paste here. So basically, we're using Bootstrap for the management of the different kind of like containers, navigations, and so on. So and that way, it's a little bit more structured. And we also do the definition of the model for the create bucket section. So when we create a new bucket, we basically capture the input of that new bucket key, which is going to be the one being sent to the OSS in order to get that that value entered into the route. So again, click on public. We're going to create a JS folder. Click on public again. We're going to create a CSS folder. Inside of the CSS folder, we need to create the main CSS file. Basically, CSS itself just going to be styling the entire web page itself with different parts, like the Forgeviewer being this amount of size, the part of the bucket being this amount of size, the body itself of the entire page, how much are we going to be filling out into the page, and also the HTML on the body. It's quite simple instructions for the CSS. So we're going to take care of this now. So now in the CSS folder, we're going to create main.css. Paste this here, save it. Body, a bucket, Forgeviewer. Fill, HTML, and body. Okay. And then we're gonna start with the JavaScript files. So this will basically handle the display of the three that the application will have on the left side. So when the document itself is ready, we will start preparing certain things within that area. So we have the option of the create bucket model. So we're going to give a button an action to open this model in order for us to be able to input the name of that bucket that we want to call. And then from there also, we're going to be doing API calls to this kind of route. So API Forge OSS and then the objects. So if we go into our server side, we will see that we do have a router. It's called objects. And then if we remember, the start.js does like a rerouting of API Forge OSS to be going into routes OSS. And then inside of that, we will have the objects one, where we are going to be able to pass on the data that needs to be passed on into that AJAX call. Same thing for the creation of a new bucket, the preparation at bucket 3 as well. So this was basically listing the buckets. We assign a couple of icons in order for this to not look without any of the icons itself, to just kind of like demonstrate, oh, this is a bucket, this is an object, and so on. And then once we have all that display, we give the we get another token that needs to get ready in order to be passed on into the launch viewer section by capturing the value of the URN. So that means that once we have one of those objects in there, that we click on it and we hit the start translation. Once that is finished, and then we click that model again, we already captured the value of the URN, and this is what we're going to be passing into the launch viewer. So then launch viewer will get initialized, and then we'll start running the process of loading the model into the viewer itself. Yeah, so let me copy this one. It's going to be called Forge3.js. So inside of the JS folder, capital Forge3.js. Then we also have a function for the translated object. So that means that if the object that's been translated already, it's going to get launched. And in case it's not, it will tell you that there's still a translation getting in process or started. So just try again in a moment. Autodesk custom menu, translate. I think that's about it. So let me save this one. And then the last one, it's basically the Forgeviewer. So we're using version 7 right now, so just make sure that you're set on version 7. This will basically have the function launchviewer.urn. Launchviewer URN. The environment is the Autodesk production. It needs a token, so this will be doing a fetch API call to API Forge Auth and then token. So if you remember in the routes Oauth, we have a route, it's called token. And because of the rewiring that we did on the start.js, we're able to actually reach towards that point. Once that initializes, the viewer initializes, we're going to be starting the viewer and passing in the value of the URN that comes in from the tree, because we need to get that value once we select that specific model. Once it gets into there, we start the loading mechanism by passing in the document ID. And if the document load is success, we will get all the default geometry from the model, assign it as viewables, and then load document in the viewer based with the document and also the viewables that are part of it. And if we need any kind of new actions to happen, let's say on the geometry being finalized to prompt an alert or to start doing something else, this is kind of like the section where we have the chance to basically add more functionality to it, right? So let's copy this one too, and it's called Forgeviewer.js. So click on the JS folder again. Viewer.js. It's this. And to summarize in the UI, we have index.html, main CSS, Forge3, Forgeviewer, and I think that's it. Now we're all set to run. Like I said, if you're using the sample and you do not have any kind of models in order for you to test out, you can go to, let's say, Revit. This is going to take you to sample Revit, where you can get files like this rack basic sample project or the RST basic sample project and so on. Okay. So in order to run it for us, we need to debug and then just start running. So basically, like I said before, and then we open on localhost 3000. Like I said before, remember that your launch.json should have your API keys. We have all the project structure correctly, model, derivative.js, Oauth.js, oss.js. The start.js basically goes to just making sure that I did not type something incorrectly. OSS, auth, public, missing. All right, I think we're actually good to go. Debug console. So we're not gonna be doing an npm start from here. Since we set up the entire debug console, we can come into debug and then basically launch the program. And we can do play. And since we did not get the error, that means that the server is listening on the port 3000. Okay. So let's go back here. Let's go to localhost 3000. And this is where we are. So yeah, so this means it's running. We don't have anything yet because we basically need to start this, right? So if we give a bucket name, so Jaime Bootcamp, it's not 2020, 2021, September. So we go ahead and create. Now we have a bucket created. So this is created now. So that means that our call to create a bucket actually worked. Our call to list a bucket actually worked as well, because now we wouldn't be able to actually see it here. And also the Forge tree itself, it's displaying the correct data itself. So now we can do a right click. We do upload file. Let's upload a file. I have some sample models, AAC, something small, not too crazy, RSD basic. So now it starts uploading the file to the bucket itself. We do a quick refresh. Now we can see that we have a file that is part of that bucket itself. If I click on it, the file is not going to show yet because we need to basically translate that file. So we hit translation and it tells you the translation started. So please try again in a moment. As of now, because of the sample, in order for us to keep it simple, we're not using webhooks because we could have the use of webhooks in order to send us a notification to when the complete extraction of the derivative is actually finished. So we wouldn't have to be guessing when to actually click to make sure that this is ready. Because if I click on it, it tells you, all right, the translation job is still running. It's at 0% complete. Please try again in a moment. And probably this number is going to start increasing as soon as we start like clicking on it a little bit more. Hopefully will increase. If not, we have something going on. But yeah, so in order for us to not have to do this kind of like in a manual way, basically what happens is that we need to check if that extraction finished. So that way we're not going to be guessing. But that will be something that you guys can use at the time of doing I guess an expansion of the application that you're building to also have webhooks enabled. So now it's up to 98%, so it's almost there. And then we click again and boom, we have a 3D model loaded. Okay. So once we have a 3D model loaded, now we have access to our toolbar. Our toolbar also allows us to do something like document browser, for example. So document browser allows you to visualize the different kind of files that are part of this Revit project. So let's say we want to like load a 2D Revit sheet. We do have an option to do that since it is part of our original project. We want to go back to the 3D view, we also can. From here, we have an access to the model browser. So this is not only a pretty picture, it's not only a 3D model loaded on your web, it does also have all the metadata that comes in with that Revit model. So now we can start basically highlighting kind of like different kind of parts of the model itself. We can start looking into the different properties that are pertaining to that specific floor and so on. All the information that comes in with that original model, it's part of here. So yeah, quite a lot of things that we can start doing with the viewer itself. We can do like some measuring if we want to, from point A to point B. It gives me a value. I think it's calibrated into decimal feet, so we can do and changes to different one. Let's say if it's meters, so it's a 50-meter thing. But yeah, we're gonna keep it in decimal feet because the US uses this kind of measurement. We can do some sort of kind of like section analysis. So let's say we want to cut into a couple of pieces this model. We can do that. We can play around also with the angle of how do we want to cut this. So let's say we want to cut it in a diagonal way. We can create that kind of angle as well. So if we see it's basically very diagonal into the kind of cut that we're able to do. Okay. So I do see a couple of questions and also a chat. So let me see. There are some dead links on the sample Revit files listed on the guide. Oh, okay, that's not good. Sample Revit. Okay, so for the, actually, let me give you guys a link where I do have some of those models actually posted. So that way I can, yeah, so this one actually. So if you want to get models, you can get them from here. Basically, you go into AAC. Let's say you go into that RSD basic sample that I show you. And what you can do is just download from here. So this will download the Revit file itself. So you can get started with those models. And then we have a question. I got invalid status code after uploading a sample RBT project. Oh, okay. So one question. When I click start translation, yes. Okay. So I think I know what's going on. Something that you need to make sure is when you start your account, okay? So when you go ahead and create your app, you need to make sure that you basically activated the subscription to get started. If you do not activate the subscription, there is no way for the cloud credits to start working. And the reason that you get a 403 forbidden, it's because your account is not authorized in order to start consuming credits. So I will say, go to, let me open again, Forge account details. And I was looking into my old account. My old account has an expiration here, but if you go into, let's say, the profile, go into Forge account details. I think you should, oh, never mind. It's back to working mode. You should see if your free trial is already in progress. If it's not in progress, that means that you need to activate that that account and then just basically start the free trial. Other than that, you're not gonna be able to consume any credits. The other thing is check if your app has selected the model derivative API. If you don't have model derivative API, that means that you're not going to be able to translate the model. Okay. So Mahmoud, can you check that? If that problem keeps being an issue, let me know, and then I can unmute your mic, and then I can even like enable your screen as well, so that way we can look into it. Okay, but for now, yes, it's expired. So yeah, that's basically the reason why. You will something that I said at the beginning is that you could use and sign up with a different email address. So if you sign up with a different email address and then just start the subscription on that one, you could create an app and then just get new set of API keys, and then from there, like just try it, right? So that could be one way. Okay, so let me head back to my slides again. Let me head back to, okay. All right. So before I move on, so yeah, so this basically created the bucket, upload the file to the bucket, request the translation for that file, and visualize it into the viewer. We're pretty much done. Okay, so let me stop my share, and then I will circle back to my slides. So now, basically, it's your turn to do that part of the create index.html, the basic layout, the JavaScript for the Forge 3, and the Forgeviewer. We're not going to take a break anymore. This is basically the final part of the tutorial for today. So I will ask again, do we have any questions as of now? I did see a couple of ones from Amud. The solution in this case is that you need to probably test it out with a different account as of now, because other than that, the next step will be to do the payment on the subscription for your account to become enabled. But I know that you're doing a bootcamp and a training and so on. So I think the easiest workaround is just try to find a different email address that you have, and then just basically sign up with that one. And that way you can start a new trial with that account, and then from there utilize the API keys for that sample. Okay. Let's see. Awesome. All right. So now, do we have any other questions? Then from the ones that are around, so let's do something quick. Can you raise a hand if you got to the final part and then you're able to see a model, or just if you're not able to see a model and you're getting a 403, like for example, that's still okay. It just means that you put up all the code in there. So can you do a raise hand if you got to that point? And that way I can see who else it's missing. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Lucas and Marvin. Awesome, I'm on. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, just to get myself an idea of who else might be needing and as like a help with this. So there's another question. Oh, if the model translation takes a while, how long would you recommend waiting until retrying? So that I will say it depends how big the file is. Can you let me know like how big the file is? Is it 50 megs, 100 megs, 5 gigs, 50 gigs. What is it? Because how long until you retry? Oh, 10 megabytes. That should be like a minute and a half, maybe somewhere around there. So you can try again in a bit. So what I was saying is that in order to not have this being a manual process, you could always benefit with the use later on of including also webhooks into your project. So we do have another service in Forge. It's called webhooks. And webhooks basically work as a single notification, a simple notification service. So basically, it gives you, it lets you know when a certain event happens. And in this case, the extraction finished. It's the event that will get triggered after the model finalized translating. Okay, so now we have, I got this error message when I ran the debugger. On-code error, cannot find module .routes data management. I do not believe, let me see something. Yeah, I do not believe we did any data management file this time. Did you by mistake went to the wrong tutorial maybe? Data management, it's more for the tutorial that you're gonna be accessing data from the user context side of it. The one that we used this time was routes model derivative, routes OSS, and routes Oauth. We do not have any data management. So that's the reason you're getting the error, because the start.js, it's looking for data management, but there is non-existing stuff in data management. Yeah, so I will say probably try to get the start.js from the view model sample, because probably what you got was just start.js. So the model is loaded now, but I had to refresh the page. Really? Huh. Okay. Well, usually what it's not gonna load by itself. You need to click on the model again in order for that thing to get triggered. So the refresh of the page basically does the same thing. And then Joe, model viewer, it's loaded on my side. Thanks. Awesome. Great to hear, Joe. Thank you. And double check it. It's from start.js. Okay. So I'm just gonna be cleaning up some stuff here. Boom, boom. Done, done. And Festim, I did get some information about the SPF2, so I will be sending that in the chat shortly. Give me 1 second. Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's what I thought. Like the start.js was probably referring to the wrong one. So you did everything correctly, but just the start.js was not pointing out to the right location. So yeah, awesome. Yeah, good to hear. Okay, so now let's see. This is what I have for that. Okay, cool. All right. So let me continue with, I tried to name the bucket Forge Bootcamp and I got error 400 when I made a small case. It worked. Yes, so bucket names need to be all in lowercase. You cannot have capital letter in any bucket name. That's the reason we do the hashing of the prefix of the client ID, but we assign every single character in that client ID to be lowercase. Other than that, it wouldn't work. So that's the reason you got the 400 error. Okay. All right, so let me continue with this, and you guys can type more questions if you have any, and I will get to them shortly. So what do we have next? So tomorrow, I'm not giving that training tomorrow, but some of my other colleagues are. We have the accessing designs with the Fusion team, the 360 docs, or Autodesk Construction Cloud. Basically, it's quite similar to this one that we did today, but instead of doing everything with buckets, you're gonna have a chance to, if you have a BIM 360 account or an ACC account, to be able to actually pull the data that lives in those services for you to start interacting and doing some other stuff from there. And then on Wednesday, I am back on Wednesday, so I will be teaching how to customize the viewer in order to add like dashboards and also what kind of extensions you can use into the viewer itself. So yeah, so that's going to be on Wednesday. And then Thursday, it's basically modifying your designs with Design Automation Service. So Revit, AutoCAD, Inventor, 3ds Max, and also Civil 3D have engines on Design Automation. And basically it's to automate tasks that you could create with the APIs of those products, but without relying on having those products installed into your machine, just basically sending the task itself to be automated directly on the cloud. Okay. So I do see another question. So I noticed when creating the different classes such as Start.js, Auth.js, etc., they were all lowercase, except for the Forge3 and the Forgeviewer ones. If possible, is there a reason between the different casing? You know, I think it is a good catch, and I will refer to, because I have found as well that it might be confusing. So I will definitely pass along those that observation. I think what it makes more sense, it's just to have everything in lowercase, so that way you guys don't get confused with that. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Okay. So 2 participants raised a hand. Awesome. Okay. So next, when it comes to support, the channel that we use in order to get support, mainly it's going to be Stack Overflow. So if you use one of the following tags, Autodesk-Forge, Autodesk-Viewer, Model Derivative, Design Automation, this gets into our system as kind of like a case question in case you guys submit something. But the reason that we kind of like incentivize people to go through the route of Stack Overflow, it's because we can, there is a community going on already. So if we are not the ones that answer, people from the community itself can also answer. And then if you use Stack Overflow and all that, you know, that the pointing system and everything, it's quite something that people kind of get to go towards too. So yeah, definitely, it's one way to get support for that. If something comes up more like it's kind of like very private data and so on, you can always write to us to forge.help@autodesk.com. Basically gets into the same queuing system, but it just bypasses the Autodesk Stack Overflow side of it. Okay, so with that, I think I have reached towards the end of the tutorial. I want to say thank you again to you guys for joining today. I know it's quite kind of like long and span across different times and so on, but I'm happy to see that a lot of you stayed towards the end and that you were able to also get through it. So yeah, any other questions, comments, or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I hope you had a good time. So thank you again, and I will catch you guys on Wednesday if you come back for that section. Bye-bye. Okay, so let me stop recording.